Hi, I'm Joyce Harper, Professor of Reproductive Science at the Institute for Women's Health at University College London. Welcome to Season 3 of my podcast, Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? This season, we'll be diving into topics that explore how to achieve good health and happiness. I'll be speaking with leading experts who will provide evidence-based advice and debunk some of the many myths around our health. Additionally, I'll be having conversations with individuals who bring unique perspectives through their lived experiences. In Season 3, we'll cover a diverse range of topics, including reproductive anatomy, inspiring female icons, chronic health conditions, factors that influence our well-being, and global women's health issues. I really hope you enjoy Season 3 of Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? It has been such a pleasure recording this podcast series on reclaiming joy, and today we are going to speak to Julia Hollander about why we sing. Julia is a singing therapist, teacher and performer. Julia's first career in theatre took her all over the world. She founded the contemporary music theatre company Operate in the late 80s, and in 1991, at the age of 25, she was the first female opera director at the English National Opera, and she has staged operas all over the world. Julia writes nonfiction that originates in the lived experience, interweaving personal narratives with cutting-edge research. Her first book, Indian Folk Theatres, derived from over a decade working in India as a stage director and performer. She went on to write 2 memoirs about family life, When the Bough Breaks and Chicken Coops for the Soul. More recently, she returned to a performing arts route with her latest book, Why We Sing, an exploration of the way in which singing benefits everyday well-being. Her plays for BBC Radio include a dramatisation of When the Bough Breaks and a drama about climate activism, The Kingsnorth Six, as well as an autobiographical documentary, The Letter. She has held writing and research fellowships with the Winston Churchill, Judith E. and Rajiv Gandhi Foundations, and has been writer-in-residence at Campsfield Immigration Detention Centre. Julia is currently the Royal Literary Fund Writer-in-Residence for the Faculty of Medieval and Modern Literature at Oxford University. Welcome, Julia.
Hello, Joyce.
So I always start by asking my interviewees about their career. And you've had an amazing career. So can you tell us more about your passion for singing and music?
Yeah, so I suppose I always had it. It's the sort of thing that just distills, I think, as you get older. But when I was a child, I sang. I sang at school, I sang at home, but I wasn't one of those extrovert kiddies who wanted to hop up on the stage and join in all the musicals. In fact, I was quite introvert, I'd say, quite a dreamer. My grandfather was a musicologist, and that was a big influence on our lives. So he came as a refugee from the Czech Republic in 1939, bringing my father, who was 3. And his sort of Eastern European wisdom and self-seriousness and love of music, total passion about particularly Mahler, so late 19th century, early 20th century music. He wrote a book about Janacek. He loved all the music of Mozart and Schubert, these songwriters and opera writers. They were sort of given me in my DNA. And certainly as a personality, his love of music seemed very romantic and exciting to me as a small child, and harked on the world that had been lost by the family because they were refugees. So in a way, the fact that musical heritage was denied them, he was running the equivalent of Radio 3 in 1939, and he had to up sticks and leave as fast as possible, really within 24 hours. So that loss, I think, probably infused my passion for music. You know, the feeling that I had this freedom, that I could sing all that stuff that was not allowed for them in whatever way, and also that I could continue a legacy, and also I could do what my grandfather's great philosophy was listen to your inner voice. So that takes me back to this introvert thing, is that as a child and certainly as an adolescent, what was my inner voice? Where is it? What's the true me? And I think always the true me responded very intimately and, honestly to music, and particularly to music that's sung. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. I love it when we've had a family member who's had such a positive influence on us, and that's a really
Mm.
beautiful story. Thank you. And you describe singing as liquid gold. So why do we sing? Why do humans sing?
So many reasons, isn't it? I did write something down because I thought, oh gosh, she's asked me the biggest question to start with. What did I write? You see, so many of these things will come up later when we're talking about the specifics of it. I wrote down, the first thing I wrote down was to express ourselves. I think because I teach singing, so people come to me to get better at singing. So why do they feel they need to do that? My belief is that we're all born with this body that resonates, and that this voice I'm using now to connect with you isn't just information, it's expression. The tones that I'm using, the words that I use, of course, but the rhythm of the way that I produce those words, you start listening to it in a sort of abstract musical way. I'm expressing myself. I'm expressing to you what I care about, what I think is important, what I want you to understand about the world that I inhabit at the other end of this digital communication we're making. All of that expression is the sort of sound part of speaking. Okay, so there's an information part, which is words that I could put down in an email to you. And then there's an expression part, which is unique to me. It's the voice that I can use, the apparatus that I have in my body. And it's also my life experience. It's the pain that I've experienced in my life. It's the joy I've experienced in my life. It's probably the hormonal escapades that my body has been through. It's all sorts of stuff that I can't really control, embodied in this sound making apparatus that I have and that I use to communicate with you. So I think of singing, and actually I would say I know singing is all that good part of the vocal mechanism, in a way, without the more intellectual stuff or the information stuff or the stuff that we could extract and just put down on paper. It's the purer part of ourselves, in a way. And that's often why people, they don't necessarily articulate it like that, but why people want to have a singing lesson is because they want more facility in those very special, almost unconscious parts of vocal expression. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. I think music and singing so powerful. That's why I wanted to do this podcast about in the series Reclaiming Joy, because I think some people can forget about listening to singing and music, or even singing and making music themselves. And I know you've written about this, that singing is good. We know, you and I know, we know it's good for our mental and physical health and our well-being. So can you tell us more about that? Because I think some people just think it's something we do for fun, but it is actually good for our health, isn't it?
Yeah. So I wrote my book, Why We Sing, during lockdown. So that was a really important time when we were forbidden to sing, right? Because those of us who were singing in communal places, choirs and things, choral groups, singing groups, sing along groups, were all told to go home, right? And actually, there were quite a lot of stories came out about choirs being particularly mega spreaders, right? It turned out that was wrong.
Yeah.
Uh, it turned out that obviously social environments, where you mingle, you're going to spread disease. But the actual act of singing was no more dangerous than any other act, say a sport or just a group meeting. So, but the fact that we were forbidden to sing in this time of illness and suffering was a really interesting time to think about what we were losing, but what we might actually gain were we to dare to sing again. So, for example, now something that's completely taken for granted as a therapy is singing for breathing. Okay, and the program that I got involved with during lockdown was English National Opera's program called ENO Breathe. And that was invented for long COVID sufferers. Okay, so long COVID sufferers, there still are long COVID sufferers, and there still are multiple reasons why you might still be suffering from the after effects of COVID. But one of the obvious ones was lung capacity failure. That might be because literally the lungs were damaged, but actually, not everybody's had the tests and the scans and all that, but it seems that actually the emotional impact of COVID and the emotional impact of being, sick over months and months and months is so debilitating that one of the ways to regenerate your health is by maximizing your breathing. Okay. And this has gone on for many centuries, when singers are tested for their breathing capacity, basically the bigger the singer, the Wagner singer, the singer who has to fill a theatre for 2,000 people over an orchestra of 200 people, has the biggest breathing capacity, right? So you can easily test someone's lung capacity. When you test one of those singers, my friend Susan Bullock being one, she's a Wagner singer, you discover that not only do they have maximum lung capacity, when they breathe in, they use the maximum amount of space available to them in their lungs. Interestingly, they also have the maximum muscle power to blow out the maximum amount of air, right? So actually their exhalation is 100% or nearly, as well as their inhalation. The rest of us at ease, like you and I are now, while I'm talking, I'm probably using between 30 and 40% of my lung capacity in talking. That sounds quite a lot. You at ease might be using 10% maximum. Sometimes people never get beyond 10%. I mean, if we take lots of little gasps, we can just use the very top of our lungs and never get round to using the really big part below. So to learn to maximize that amazing facility we have here in our bodies of releasing the rib cage, getting the diaphragm to go right down so that the organs are pushed out of the way, so that the lungs can actually expand within our chest, is something that is happening in ENO Breathe in all sorts of clever ways, exercises, but most importantly, singing, actually. Because the thing about singing, if you want to do it, if you feel compelled to do it, or if somebody says it's good for you, is that you start to use this natural system of lungs inside rib cage to a greater degree. You want to get to the end of the phrase because it's there for you, and because music has that sort of rhythm and form to it that you want to get to the end of the phrase, you want to get to the cadence, you want to render that lovely melodic line. So that's one thing that it does. It helps us breathe better, and it compels us to breathe in a way that is sort of natural and comes from a bit of our body, not like the bit of our mind where we go, oh, pop that pill and then I'll feel better, and then I don't feel better and I feel resentful about that. That very passive model of medication that is unfortunately the tradition of medicine in our culture. It's an active thing. It asks you to please join in with this beautiful melodic line that you've known since you were a baby, or that's there in your culture, and you have this compulsion to express yourself and also complete a musical gesture. And actually by doing that, you exhale, and then the natural the upshot from that is that you inhale. The next thing you do is you'll inhale, and you start to train your body without even realizing it to maximize its capacity. So that's one thing, breathing. Do you want to know about some more?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please.
Yes. All right. So this is basically behavioral psychologists and chemists have got together and they've done tests on people who sing, and they You see, I'm a bit kind of averse to just giving you the chemical stuff, partly because I'm not a chemist, nor am I a behavioral psychologist, actually, but also because it doesn't tell the whole story. But they're quite nice, these facts. So let's give you the facts. These chemicals that we have in our bodies, most of them, I think, hormones, are regarded as what they call biomarkers. So the trouble is, as I say, I'm no expert. If my body has more cortisol in it now than it did 10 minutes ago, the easy way to test it is to take some saliva 10 minutes ago and now. Okay, so it tends to be the case when these behavioral psychologists come along and test people's saliva that the bad hormones, cortisol being a stress hormone, go down within that time frame if I sing. Okay, so if I just speak, if I have a stressful conversation with somebody, for sure the cortisol levels go up. Interestingly, if I sing, the cortisol levels are going to be lower. So alongside that, the serotonin levels go up. So serotonin being this sort of calming association. The endorphins go up. The endocannabinoids go up. Those are the sort of ones that take away pain. The oxytocin levels go up. Those are the ones that bond us. The thing is, it's not a simple cause and effect relationship. I do understand that from a chemical point of view. So I don't want to just you to think of it as all the feel-good hormones are there when I sing. It's more that I have a pleasurable experience, and therefore those particular hormones associated with pleasure or bonding or less pain go up. It's a complex symbiotic kind of relationship between those chemicals that I create and the experience that I'm having. But for sure, because the biomarkers are easily tested in saliva, the feel-good hormones, especially endorphins that we all tend to think of as, yay, those are my happy hormones, they go up. A really nice one, because I feel somehow it's probably chemically more reliable, is blood tests. And they have actually taken blood tests on singers, professional singers, singing Mozart, singing sad music from Mozart's Requiem. They sing Mozart's Requiem, that takes them maybe an hour. And when they test for immunosuppressants, so our natural chemicals that help us protect ourselves from infection, those immunosuppressants have gone up, way up in the blood system at the end of that singing experience. So it seems like the chemistry of our bodies is really benefiting from that experience of singing. Yeah.
I love that. You're so on my page. I at this time of my life, I am chasing those happy hormones, however which
Okay.
way. And there's lots of ways. And this series on reclaiming joy, actually, I think everything. I'm pretty sure all the topics I'm going to be talking about, we are chasing those happy hormones. So I love it. I love what you said. And in your book, you said we aren't singing because we are happy. We are happy because we are singing. So I love that comment.
Yes. Well, because, we all know what it is to have a bad day or to feel blue or to feel depressed. The idea that if I can just get around to 5 minutes singing, I will feel better. Isn't that just so simple?
So simple. And I'm all for free, simple ways of bringing on happiness. And singing is
Yeah.
it's at the top. It's at the singing and dancing for me. I always say to everyone,
Yeah.
if you had a bad day, come home. Hopefully no one's watching, even if they are, it doesn't matter. But yeah, put some music on, have a sing, have a dance. I think it's almost impossible not to smile and feel happy, as you said. So
Exactly.
yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Right now, let's talk about how we sing. So I did grade 5 piano, and my piano teacher said to
Yes.
me, she said, you can't do this. These were her words. They might not have been her words, but this is how I remember it. She says, you can't do grade 6 because you really are tone deaf. That was very mean, really mean. And I always say, if I had another life, I'd love to have been a pop star, a rock chick, and been at the front of a band. I'm very extrovert, so I would love to have been a singer in a band. Every time I watch any any female singing, I love them, and I wish it was me. I think it would be. I'd love to have done that. So, can
Yeah.
anyone sing? Was my piano teacher wrong? Could you help people who think they can't sing to learn to sing?
Yes, yes, I've had plenty of students who come to me because they can't sing. We're complicated creatures, aren't we? You know, what I was saying about the endorphins, it's not just that we generate happy hormones, it's that we are having a relationship with music and a communication and a self-expression that has this sort of cycle about it where the hormones respond. Similarly, if you're born, I don't know what sort of family you were born into, but if you're born into a family where they don't make music and they don't listen to music, you're far less likely to become a musician than one born into a musical family or a music making, music loving family. I have to say, grade six is quite far along. You know, if you, I teach piano to little kiddies, it takes at least 5 years to get to grade five.
Oh
Did
yeah,
you
it did.
take that long, do you
Yeah,
reckon?
yeah. My grandmother was fantastic. She was our musical person, and we lived with my grandmother my whole life. So she played the banjo, the violin, the piano. We had a couple of pianos in our house.
Nice.
But interestingly, I was the only one who started it from a young age. I don't know why. I don't know why. I can't. I was the youngest by a long way. I don't know if it was just chaos when all the others. I don't know. One of my sisters can sing, and she still sings. She's older than me, and she
Yeah,
still sings in a choir. And I go to
yeah.
watch her, and I'm so jealous. But I think I'm going to try. I'm going to have some lessons. I wish you lived near. I'd come and see you. But I've got a brilliant music teacher near me, so I think we're going to explore that. But I also think you've mentioned a few times about community and singing in
Mm,
groups now is amazing. I think that's something as well that came from COVID. I didn't know that there were many local choirs before COVID, but certainly, and being told we couldn't do it, I think is like red rag to a bull for most people. So, but now we
yeah.
have all these lovely choirs and communal singing going on. So, is
Mm.
is that good for us? Is it better to sing in a choir than sing alone?
Of, well, of course, so you feel safer, don't you? So if you feel insecure about your voice, you feel safer when you've got your mates around you. And this is why things like man choir work so well. So, you know, we've got an incredibly successful man choir here in Oxford. And actually, the women are a little bit annoyed because there are some women's choirs and they're successful too. They're fab. My friend Emily runs one called the Feisty Choir, and it just is going from strength to strength. And those women have a really proper sisterly bond about them. You know, it moves far beyond just the singing soon. And for the men, there's a level of tenderness and trust that comes about when it's just men on their own. That's really special. But the trouble is, there's lots of music written, and anyway, to be written and enjoyed for men and women together. And those choirs are not really very successful at the moment. So you're thinking, oh, why is it that these social groups evolve that are just gender based? Because actually, musically, it'd be better if we could all get together. Anyway, going back to this, do you want me to talk a bit more about the tone deaf thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you can't possibly be tone deaf if you got to grade five piano. I just think you had a mean piano teacher. But you might have had, we all have unique things, don't we? We have unique taste in music that comes about not just culturally, but just for who we are. Like you say, you're an extrovert. By the time you get to grade six, how old were you then? A teenager, young teens,
I
adolescent
was
kicking in?
13, I think. Yeah, it was way
Yeah,
before my O levels in those days. Yeah.
yeah. So there's a load of cultural stuff around that, but also hormonal stuff around that, isn't there? One of which is the way that your voice works. So, with all the hormones raging, the thing about boys' voices breaking is the obvious example. We're not meant to say break now, we're meant to say change.
Oh,
All that
really?
is suddenly they have a growth spurt and their larynx suddenly is twice the size. And
Oh,
they have to manage that pretty much overnight. The fact that these vocal folds that are only as big as the sound maker in this little throat of ours, complicated little apparatus, but the actual sound maker is two little membranes that come together the size of my little fingernail. Okay, that's the size. So if it doubles in size, that's a huge, huge physiological disaster for these poor lads. And
Wow.
that is literally what happens. Boys suddenly have a growth spurt, and suddenly they're dealing with a mechanism, a sound making mechanism that is out of control. And they have to relearn sound making. So, and girls go through something similar. They don't tend to have such a huge growth spurt, and hormonally different things, but similarly dramatic. And we all have a certain physiology that's unique to us, whatever it might be, the blue eyes, the grey hair, that's me. My height, my physique is all unique to me. And definitely the sound making apparatus, tiny as it is going to be unique in every single person. So the sound that you are able to make, however musical you are, is going to be unique to you. So that's one of the maybe the downers about singing is you can't just buy yourself a Steinway and make the most wonderful sound because that instrument's built like that. You are stuck with the instrument that you're given. But we can first of all, we can put ourselves in environments where that instrument is more or less suitable. In other words, if you want to be a gritty blues singer and you've got a gritty instrument, isn't that brilliant? That is your environment. Probably you shouldn't be singing exquisite Baroque music, So all of that stuff has to be calibrated, and maybe your piano teacher was a very conventional classical music person. Probably in those days it was more likely to be classical music. So you were being asked to inhabit that certain musical world, which now luckily it's not nearly so narrow. But you were also your extrovert, possibly singing in a way that didn't take on board hormone changes, the taste of the people around you, the challenges of tuning with other voices. I often say to people who come and tell me they're tone deaf and they want to learn to sing, the first thing you've got to do is learn to listen, because one of the amazing feats of singing is to listen and replicate a pitch simultaneously. So, it's not just hitting a note, it's literally all of this resonating apparatus here. The main one, by the way, being the pharynx, which is this tube up the back of my mouth. That is next door to the cochlea, which is where I do my listening. So somebody sings me a note, I hear it here, and then in exactly that same region, I have to replicate it at the same time, right? So that's an amazing skill that needs to build up over years and years. Ideally, it builds up from when I'm a baby, and I'm very interested in tonal sounds when I'm a baby. But when it's all changing with growth and adolescence and so on, you're going to go through phases where it becomes harder physiologically to do that. So training oneself to respond to music with one's voice is a particular thing that takes a lot of attentiveness, and I say it starts with listening, sort of internal listening. Yeah. So anyway, the statistic is, as far as we know, Isabelle Peretz, the great expert in Canada, who runs the tone deaf testing, neurological testing at a place, at a brain centre in Montreal, says that it's about 2% of the population, that's what she reckons, are actually tone deaf. And what that means, and interestingly, it's often associated with other neurological aberrations, disorders. So there's an association with autism, for example, and particular autistic conditions where you have problems processing emotion. If you're on that part of the autism spectrum, you may also have a leaning towards tone deafness. Isn't that interesting, that particular association? But it basically means that neurologically you find it really super hard to do what I've just described, hear a pitch and replicate it. That having been said, there is actually a Canadian who's written a book about learning to sing, overcoming exactly that physiological problem that Isabelle Peretz had diagnosed in him. And she used to say it was 4%. She now only says it's 2% because she's tested more and more people, and she's done more and more work with people like this guy who's written, I can't remember his name at the moment. Anyway, I can find it for you, the Tone Deaf book, and realise that they can overcome it. Takes a lot of work, takes a lot of regular training.
But I think one key message from what you've just said is if anyone's listening and they have, like me, always wanted to sing and haven't had the
Mm.
confidence or feel that they're good enough, let's go and have some lessons. I'm going to go and have some lessons.
Yeah.
Let's all go and have some lessons
Mm.
and just enjoy it for sure. And you mentioned
And
babies.
having the thing
Oh,
about
sorry.
lessons, well, just to say, because it's an innate thing, but it's a case of needing someone you trust and who is unjudgmental, not your piano teacher, um, help you with this unique thing that is unique to you. Because going to a choir, if you haven't trained yourself to find those pitches, it's going to be, in a way, even harder because you're surrounded by other people all singing competently in your estimation, and they're learning fast and they're getting ready for a concert, and all of that pressure is not going to help. So you need a safe space to start learning. Yeah, start coming to terms with it all.
Very, very good advice. Yeah. Don't. I
Mm.
did end up doing some singing with a choir because I was visiting a friend accidentally. It was choir night, and I just sang very quietly. The recording sounds
Oh, well,
okay. I
that's a good
can't.
idea. Yeah, that's cool. And then gradually you'll get more confident.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm sure I'm not the only one who's been thinking about having some lessons. So write that on your to-do list if you've
Sure.
been thinking about it. So let's
Yeah.
go back. Let's go right back. So you mentioned babies, and it's so interesting if and when we're pregnant, we're normally encouraged to play music and sing while we're pregnant, and then when our babies arrive, we it's very usual to sing them lullabies, and culturally around the world, lullabies are a big thing. And so
Mm.
why does this help baby sleep? And then we seem to lose that, and we don't do that. Lots of people I know, adults, are having problems sleeping. Why don't we get someone to sing us a lullaby? Would that work?
Not a bad idea. Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, problem sleeping. I get myself back to sleep using one of the breathe techniques, actually, which is a countdown, you count your breaths from 10 to 9, 8. But sometimes I do it trying to memorize, because I'm always trying to memorize a song, so going over my lyrics. And these things are basically simple, repetitious things, aren't they? So 10, 9. So we know exactly what number's coming up, but we do it in this particular pattern, conscious of our breathing. Now, in a completely abstract sense, that's what a song is, isn't it? So if I sing you a lullaby now, what lullaby shall I sing? Well, if you just did the most famous song ever, Twinkle, twinkle, little star, and then I breathe, how I wonder what you are. Up. It's got rhythm, it's got a pattern, and it's got a breathing process, hasn't it? That's completely intrinsic to that song. So it's got these sort of mesmeric, a simple song like that has got mesmeric qualities to it that are not dissimilar to my counting 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Also, there are certain songs that are just really calming, aren't they? Like the melody is a really, really smooth one. It doesn't jump all over the place. It's rhythmically really easeful. It asks the singer to do things very, very calmly and smoothly, not jumpily. So there are songs that are designed to mesmerize you, get you to sleep. If you go back to the sort of baby's point of view, babies aren't terribly interested in words, but they are very interested in emotion, and they're very interested in sound. So in the womb, what were they used to? They were used to the rhythm of the mother's blood going around her body, particularly her heartbeat, and they were used to the sound of the mother's voice heard through all the liquid of her body. So not only is there the thumping of her heart, but there's also the gurgling of her gut and whatever. So what the baby hears is the mother's voice, mediated by liquid, essentially, which means that they hear a sort of sing-song version of her voice rather than a percussive version of her voice. So a beautiful melodic line, like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, is the way that they hear speech, let alone singing before they're born. So that will be a comfort because, of course, being back in the womb, for most of us, is a comfort, isn't it?
Yeah.
The rhythmic patterns. I mean, there's such interesting research into babies' responsiveness and babies' musicality, but definitely they respond to melody. Apparently, one of the bits of research that's been done is breastfeeding. The way that babies suck is particular. Every baby sucks in a different way, and it tends. One of the things French behavioral psychologists have discovered is that they suck in a particular rhythm, and that rhythm often replicates the sound of their parent's voice and particular things that the parents have said. So if the parent regularly says, "Get us a cup of tea, darling," that will be abstracted into da 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 da. That's a rhythmic pattern, and the sucking will be.
Brilliant.
So it shows you how innately musical we all are. That baby hears that rhythmic pattern, thinks, "Oh, I like that," and replicates it in the only way they know how, which is the sucking pattern. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Later on, they'll start babbling. They'll babble. If you've sung to them, they'll ba 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 ba. There'll be something of that pattern going on in their babble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So they feel safe with sound because they've heard it in the womb. They feel safe because it has particular qualities. If you're singing a lullaby, that calm them down. And of course, they know your voice because they've heard it from when they were in the womb too. So that's a good thing. Also, we tend to move when we sing. So if you've got a baby on your shoulder and you're rocking them, and again, that a rocking movement is makes you feel safe, doesn't it?
Very soothing. Yeah, certainly. And
Yeah.
and then Julia, at school, I'm sure. Well, you've done a lot of work around the world. Do all school children sing? Do they sing in every country around the world? We certainly did in the UK. We did a lot of singing in school.
Mm.
So why is that important?
Yeah, I haven't researched whether that every school in the world sings. That would be interesting to know, wouldn't it? Certainly, there's research that says that of all types of song, if you think of songs as, you get religious songs, communal songs, protest songs, there are lots of functions for song. The one that is common to every single culture in the world is lullabies. School songs are a bit different, but we do counting songs in order to learn to count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I caught a fish. You learn to count from that. You might certainly, when we were at school, we learnt foreign languages in songs, didn't we? So, and I sing with, I lead dementia choirs, and however demented someone is, if they've lost language, they tend to be able to sing, and they often tend to be able to remember their childhood songs the best. So if I start Frère Jacques, everyone will join in, no problem. That's one of the ways I learned French, and it's also just well embedded in my memory and in the memory of people who might otherwise have lost all sorts of other language. So interesting. So schools use song for learning as learning tools. Shall I explain a bit about why that is?
Yeah.
I mean, there's this brain idea. There's this neurological idea. I'm certainly not a neurologist, but there's a very simple thing, which is right side, left side of the brain. It's a sort of thing we use, isn't it? A bit like endorphins. It's just a common idea about the way the brain functions, that we have these separate cortical functions, and that the left side tends to be the strategic, organized bit of the brain. The computer part is the left side. God knows, AI probably thinks it can do right side, but I'm going to maintain that we humans are the only ones who have a right part of the brain that does emotion, intuition, holistic thinking. So one of the ways of thinking of it, which I quite like because I've kept chickens, is that the left side of the brain for a chicken, like for a human, is target orientated. So the chicken is pecking around, looking for seeds, and the left side does that, seed, 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 seed. The right side, meanwhile, is the holistic side that is aware of the whole environment around them, because, of course, predators need also to be thought about. As I'm pecking, I've also got to be aware, is there a fox in the bush? And it's the right side of the brain that does that. So humans, it's thought, have right brains that are very, very ancient and very able to understand, comprehend sort of, all of that creative, intuitive, emotional part of our experience. And in amongst all that is pitch making. So when we hear notes, when you hear the different pitches in my voice, that's the right side of your brain responding. Meanwhile, in the left side is the other part of singing, not the pitch, but the words. So here, somewhere here, is Broca's and Venneker's. That's a tiny part of the left brain, which was discovered around Darwin's time. And that is our word processing part of our brain. So that tiny bit of the left brain is one part of singing and communication. Meanwhile, a huge element of the right side does emotion and pitch making. Therefore, for a child learning words in a foreign language or learning new words like number words, to combine the two gives us much more opportunity to remember it. If I'm bringing in my right brain whilst I'm trying to route certain vocabulary into my left brain, then I've got a much better chance of remembering it.
Yeah,
And
that's
that is
yeah.
probably why we remember it when we're old as well, because we've hooked those particular words to certain pitches or pitch patterns, and those pitch patterns are held in a totally different part of the brain from the part of the brain that's meant to be remembering the words.
That's exactly what I was going to pick up on. You've said it now. We remember all those songs. When I was young, it was
Mm,
Rod Stewart and all those bands that we used to listen
yeah.
to. We can
Mm,
remember all the words, and
mm,
we're all aware that so many people are fascinated by how can I remember that song for I haven't heard that song for 40 years and it comes on the radio and I can remember it. So
yeah.
it does make you feel really like, wow, this my brain is working.
Yeah. And of course, you're moving as you say it, because often we have to, if we're trying to remember the words and they don't come, if to just go, oh, they'll come in a minute. Or if I dance to it, if I just feel it, if I just let it be, it'll come. And I think that's right side behavior. That's a holistic thing of the whole of me does still have those words somewhere, but it's not in the, oh, I've got to remember this thing, very narrow, targeted sort of part of the brain.
Yeah.
It's a feelingful part of the brain.
And you did mention dementia, and I know that this is something that you're working on now. And in your book,
Mm.
you talked about the Arts on Prescription program, which was launched by the NHS in 2019. And you've talked quite a lot
Mm.
about singing for ill health and as a therapy. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, arts on prescription. I every time I see a GP, there are a few around. I say, "Have you got an arts on prescription person? Have you got a link worker in your general practice?" And they always say yes.
Oh,
The trouble is, when you go to the GP, you don't necessarily know there is that person. I'm not sure how full time they are. I mean, the economy of a general practice is quite complicated, isn't it? So whether they're coming and going and affordable and not so affordable at different times, I don't know. But the point is, general practitioners are highly aware that passing pills over the counter is not the only way, or often not even the most effective way of treating illness and disease. So there is more and more opportunity, and it happens to be rather cheaper than paying big pharma, for us to go in search of other therapeutic means of not necessarily curing ourselves, but living with disease. I mean, I go back to that ENO Breathe program. I do very strongly believe, and as I get older and I get more decrepit, I'm more aware of this than ever. Or maybe I'm in this very fortunate period of still middle age into early old age where I have a sense that I'm responsible for my health, and that making myself passive is never going to work. That I need to work in collaboration with doctors and physiotherapists and, all of those amazing people. So singing, I think, inhabits that sort of world. If you go into a singing event, um, because of a particular problem that you've got, say dementia, you're going in order to help yourself. You go and you join a group where you feel safe. That's really important. So with other people who have dementia, that's a good idea. You're going in the case of dementia, there are so many sort of comorbidities, as they call them, aren't there? So one of the big things is that when you start losing language and um, you lose memory, you lose your sense of self. And that means that you become much less confident. I mean, it's so obvious, isn't it? Once people get to a stage where they can't remember where they put their coat, or they can't remember where the kettle goes on, or really fundamental stuff, that has a huge impact on your confidence. But even early stage dementia, when people are forgetting words and forgetting names, the first thing that happens is that you start cutting off from other people. So a choir enables you to socialize, because you're not going for obvious social things like what's your name and what do you do, but you're just going to sing, so you don't have those sort of pressures. And if you go to a choir where there are other people who have similar issues going on in their lives, then all the better, because then you don't have to answer for yourself at all. You're all in it together. So they are a marvelous social opportunity. And there's this normalizing thing that happens in a choir. So you go with your carer or your partner, whoever it is, and they're on top of things, and they can take up the song sheet and read out the words. You may have lost that capacity, but actually, funnily enough, if there aren't any song sheets, and I tend to actually encourage people just to try and remember or to sing along, because we can all sing just that microsecond behind the leader, especially if we know the song. And all the songs I sing are very popular songs. Actually, it often happens that the people with dementia remember quicker than the people who haven't got dementia. So
Yeah.
that, is a total equalizer. And the person without dementia may have all sorts of other preoccupations in their lives and stresses and one of the first things that happens when you're stressed, isn't it, is you forget stuff. So a song is a great equalizer, because the person who's suffering in so many ways from dementia may well instantly have all the words to, I don't know, the pop song that they sang when they were 13. That is a wonderful thing. The other thing that happens, going back to that brain, is that they'll respond to pitch. They'll respond to the tune, and they'll join in with the tune, even if they can't necessarily remember all the words. And that actually is the thing that allows us all to join in, is the tune. So there are so many ways in which people, in the moment, if they're suffering from dementia, can benefit from singing. What tends to happen is, because of all those feel-good hormones we were talking about, is that they feel better at the end of it. They feel more confident, they feel connected with other people, they feel happier. And that, for those reasons, they will then go home and start to remember where they put their coat and how to put the kettle on. Fundamental stuff will come back. They've increased their confidence. There's just a feel-good factor that helps them get on with their daily life. And of course, the hope is that they come back in a week's time and the cycle happens again. That the singing can only benefit all the rest of their life.
Just going back to what we said at the beginning, it is good for our good health and our happiness to be singing.
Yeah,
And here we've
yeah.
got some really solid reasons. I don't think we sing enough to the older generations, do we? I don't.
No, it's that school thing. Yeah, one of the things I was going to say sounds a little bit cynical, maybe, but one of the reasons I think schools have always done singing. I mean, these days there's all sorts of self-consciousness about cultural norms and what's appropriate in very complex social environments in schools. But there is a sort of national anthem element to schools, isn't there? Well, it's not national; it's the school anthem. Oh my goodness. So I sing in weddings, and the amount of public school weddings you spot them a mile off, where they sing Jerusalem. And
Yeah.
everybody jumps up and they're, whoa, off they go, because it was the school anthem.
Mm.
And what that is, why I confused it with national anthem, is it's that particular use of oxytocin where we all feel bonded by singing together. And then, it's just a small shift to feeling like this solid social kind of whatever that is, identification happens, which, there are pros and cons in all that. But why did I bring that up now? The school anthem. Yeah, that's maybe a cynical reason. But the pleasure of singing together that we get at school and is encouraged at school then in our culture, gets forgotten, unfortunately, for many, many, many people. But it should come back at the end of life, shouldn't it? At least we should be able to go back to those bonding experiences that we had at school when we're older, and we are reflecting and we are thinking about ourselves as a store of memory, a store of long experience. I mean, even for someone who's losing short-term memory, long-term memory often becomes more vivid. So that childhood period becomes incredibly important as the way that we identify ourselves in the world. And singing is, again, a normalizer, because we don't think of singing as only a children's thing. Singing is something that any age person can do.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
certainly middle-aged people, as we said, that lots of the choirs. I think certain age groups. I think they have an age range, but certainly, from my experience, they are more middle-aged people, which is fantastic. People that may have just
Mm.
been sitting at home, may have been lonely, and then they're out there. And you've done so much
Yeah.
work globally, and you said that in our culture we don't sing enough, and we do lose it after school. Most people till they get to middle age and join a choir. But globally, singing and music is just embedded in almost, probably every culture. And you've done so much work on
Yeah.
this. What would you say?
Oh, I feel sad that consumer culture basically has conspired to make us buy our singing. That's the
Yeah.
bottom line, isn't it? I can't do it, but Beyonce can do it. If I pay my money to Spotify, I can buy the best singing in the world. That's the deal, isn't it? So it's really in the interests of people who own the rights to whoever it is, celebrity singers, to make us as silent as possible so that we become consumers and not generators of sound. So my experience has been, I mean, some of it is long ago now, going to villages in India in the 90s. They didn't have mobile phones. They had one television in the whole village. Basically, they were a sort of pre-technology culture. If you wanted entertainment, you have to generate it yourself. And we now know, so this is 30 years later, that actually all of those wholesome things, campfires and hiking and gardening and all the sort of in nature things we do for therapy reasons now. But one of the reasons we're doing it is to cut off from the technology that's dominating our world and making us actually more anxious and more neurotic. So if you think that singing is something we do without technology, and that people who didn't have technology in the 90s had to do it day in, day out in order to have music around them, then obviously those are the places to go, I think, for a healthy, happy life.
I love it. Couldn't agree more. I'm always going on about digital detox and that we need to get away from
Yeah,
these gadgets, and get
yeah.
back to
But it's
basics.
it's really hard though, isn't it? Because
Really
that word
hard.
detox, we literally have to deprive ourselves of this thing that we've kind of get addicted to.
I know.
But in
It's
amongst all of that addiction is definitely this consumer passivity, you know? We just, as consumers, we're meant to be passive. We're meant to be told what is good for us. Oh, it's good for you to listen to music. Well, yeah, I love music. Okay, I'll shut up and listen to somebody who's really good at it. Do it.
I love that. That's
Mm.
that's great. Now we're almost at the end. So my
Yeah.
podcast is called "Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This?" So for singing, about singing, did have people said to you, "I didn't realize that about singing." Has anyone said that? What sort of things have they said in relation to
Has
singing?
anyone said what? Sorry.
Why didn't I
Say
know
again.
this? Why didn't I know this before? Why didn't I know singing was? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe going to improve my happiness or improve my well-being. Are there things about singing that people didn't know, and they've said, "I said to you, I didn't know that."
Trouble is, it's a bit like being a doctor. You only see the people who come to
True,
you, don't you? As
true.
a singing teacher, people come to me and they say, "I've discovered." But I get, for example, tomorrow I'll see a guy in his 70s whose son-in-law has told him, "It's good for you. You're feeling a bit low. You don't have a big enough social life. I'm sending you to singing lessons."
Love
That
it.
happens a lot. Hmm.
Yeah, and that's certainly, I think, something I'm going to take away from this podcast. I'm going to go and book a few singing lessons. I've got nothing to lose at all. Maybe a bit of cash, but
Yeah,
besides that, I've got nothing to lose.
yeah,
And Julia, the final questions then, totally not really, well, your answers might be related to singing, but I am quite obsessed with finding out what makes people happy and where's their happy place. So, Julia, what makes you
yeah,
happy and where is your happy place?
yeah. I feel very fortunate. I have a lot of happy places. A lot of them are in nature. I mean, I live in Oxford, and the great thing about Oxford is it has a huge floodplain, so they can't build on it. So I get to walk in meadows, which at the moment are completely phenomenal. And I do that every day because I have a dog. So, and I know that's my happy place. I know whatever's been going on, if I go into that meadow full of buttercups and meadowsweet, oh, my spirit lifts. But when it comes to singing, when it comes to singing, I know again there are places. So there's a very beautiful church in the centre of town where I get paid to sing. So, and I have to say, sometimes the fact that I get paid is an incentive. But the fact that I get to sing in this amazing acoustic with this amazing light flooding in through the windows, and with people who are there not because I'm a star or because I'm, you know, they've paid tickets. They come because they want to somehow access something very extraordinary, which is what they call God. And I have the privilege of doing that for them through my music making. That is something. And tacked on to that, a very different singing experience I have regularly at the moment is a friend of mine who has pancreatic cancer. And he's done amazingly well. He's had endless chemo. He's survived all of that and a huge operation. And what he does, he gets a group of us to come round regularly when he's feeling up to it. And we sit round, it just so happens, his circular kitchen table. And we sing very simple Taizé chants and Pete Seeger and Peggy Seeger songs. He really likes them. Sometimes Joni Mitchell comes out. Whatever is part of our people in their 60s. He's just in his 70s now, but we sing, and we sometimes we do it orally and sometimes we do it with song sheets. But singing with friends or family round a table is an amazing, amazing thing. And for him, it's life now. It's a life force for him because he's looking at a very much shortened life and a lot of pain. But for him to have friends sing with him is his way of being more himself and knowing why he's here. And maybe it also consoles him where he's going as well. Like those people who are looking for God in the church, singing does reach another plane in that way.
That is so
Yeah.
beautiful, Julia, and you have really summarised for me reclaiming joy. And you talked about going to a beautiful venue as well. I think there's
Mm.
nothing like hearing live music, especially in some stunning surroundings. I'm going to a candlelit concert on Saturday on my own, and just going to have a lovely hour listening to some beautiful music in a beautiful setting. And it's I
Yeah.
think it is a happy place. Certainly, it is.
Yeah.
And my very last question, which is some people find a little bit tricky, but what advice would you give your younger self?
Right. Is this
Sorry.
one of those wish I'd known this earlier sort of things?
Yeah.
About singing?
About anything. Can be about anything.
Well, I'm thinking about singing now, aren't I? I'm thinking about this lovely conductor I work with in the church now, who, if you make a mistake, he says something like, "Well, nobody died," or, "Okay, well, just think of the next note. you did brilliantly with the next note. That was one note in 600 notes. Whatever he says makes it all easier. And actually, mistakes are part of life, and you don't learn without mistakes and all of that. And I'm still needing to be reminded of that at my age. As a child, I didn't know that sort of stuff. And I got very het up about making mistakes or not being good enough or, wanting to be better than I was, or all of those inhibitors. They inhibit you. And actually, as a young child, you need to know that mistakes are part of life, that self expression is one of the most important things about life, and that if you love something like music, that is going to carry you through, and the other stuff is all just rubbish, all the judgment and all the exams and all the imposition, all of those boundaries are only limiting, and you just have to shut off from them. I wish I'd had just a bit more guts to be spirited and know that mistakes were part of learning. Yeah. And I think things are easier these days. I think teachers and leaders do know that, and they didn't know that 40 years ago, 50 years ago. But certainly as a teacher, I'm very much wanting to promote that sort of thinking. Yeah.
That is really lovely. And I didn't mention it earlier, but it's funny that you've said that because I mentioned my grandmother. And when I used to practice the piano, she was always there. As I said, I lived with her. And she would always say, wrong, 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 every time I hit a wrong note.
Yes.
And that definitely had a
Yes.
negative effect. And it's interesting that you've said that because and I think that the way we teach people now, just embrace warts and all.
Yeah. Well, because actually, it's often the bits of us that are different, quirky, wrong, that are the interesting bits. And why do we all want to be the same? Of course we don't.
Agree. I love that. On that wonderful note, Julia, it's been absolutely fantastic to talk to you and to hear you sing as well. I was hoping that you do a bit of singing. You've got I knew you'd have a beautiful voice, and I hope that we've encouraged people at worst to go and put some music on that's already recorded, but at best just to sing their heart out. And I think singing a little bit every day, just a few minutes, would really reclaim
Definitely.
joy for many, many people. So, Julia, thank you. Thanks for all the brilliant work that you've done over the decades, and long may it continue.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Well, lovely to talk to you, Joyce.
Thank you.
Fantastic.